Good morning, everybody. As David mentioned, my name is Brydie Lear. I'm Global Head of People Analytics at ING Bank. That's based in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. So I want to talk a little bit about facing the future of people analytics. And why do I want to talk about the future? Because we're at PAFOW, which is like cool, right? It's an opportunity to talk about dreams and objectives. And the second reason is I don't think we talk about facing the future enough in people analytics. We talk a lot about, how to build the capability, where we have impact, what are some of the challenges, how can we overcome them. But we really need to shape the future of our discipline and keep up with all the developments that Al mentioned just now. So I've been building our capability for about 6 years now, and it's amazing the explosion of development in our field. When I first started, there was no books. There was a playbook from Google that they kept very, very secret. And now we're here, 200 people talking about this topic just 5 years later. So I'm very proud of what we've achieved over the last 5 to 6 years. We've grown from 2 to 17 FTEs. We have the full suite of kind of data science, data engineering, data analysis, org psych, and listening capabilities. We have education programs for our HR professionals and people analytics, and I sit in both the HR leadership team and our analytics leadership team. But what kind of keeps me awake at night is, am I creating value? So do I have that right now, and do I have it right for the future? Because this is such a rapidly developing field, we kind of have to constantly keep asking ourselves. So this is my view on where we're heading, and what are some of the kind of shifts we need to make as a discipline to meet the future. It's not ING's opinion. Of course, it's born out of my experience at ING, but this is my personal opinion. And I am very, very happy if you guys challenge or say, oh, hell no, Brydie, you've got that completely wrong, because that's what we're here for. So come on this journey with me. It's the reality that we face several challenges if we look towards the future, and we definitely need to shift to meet those needs. We don't want to look like this guy, right? He almost looks totally confused. We want to have a view and shape the future of our discipline and keep up with the developments in our field. So I'm just going to talk through 2 or 3 challenges that I think we face that we need to make a bit of a shift about. The first one is what has created value in the past will not create value in the future. I think that we are already exhausting the value that we can create out of focusing on HR topics. So the impact of HR processes, optimizing those things. So we've had a lot of success in people analytics because it's new, right? We have abilities in people analytics to consume data, wrangle data, describe data that we've never had before in HR, right? I went to the board when I first started with a 3D visualization of our succession pipeline, and we uncovered flight risk that we'd never seen before. And this had huge impact at the board level. Now that's no longer what's having impact at the board level, 5 years down the track. So I think 5 years ago, our esteemed colleagues, Ulrich and Rasmussen, wrote this article, and they were really already looking forward towards the fact that we don't want to be a fad, a shiny new thing with our new capabilities to describe data and analyze data. And they pointed out the fact that to avoid being another management fad, we really need to take an outside-in view, not an inside-out view. So focus on the full value chain of HR through to business value, not just the impact of HR. And I'm afraid we're still really playing in that space. If we think about where people analytics has emerged from, it's emerged from small specialized teams in engagement or reward or strategic workforce management and grown out from there. And if you look, the #1 application of people analytics is still recruitment and selection. And that's had a lot of value because it's a really transactional process, and we've had a lot of impact in that. But with the speed in development in HR tech and cloud-based solutions, startups entering this space, this will all be things that are just plugins into our HR tech in the future. An attrition model will just be something that's a standard offer from those HR tech companies. So whereas now an attrition model is really giving a lot of insights when we build them. So where do we need to head? We're already starting to explore broader applications, so organization network analysis, trying to look at other aspects, and I think that's where we need to make a shift, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So the second challenge we have is that quantifying behavior at scale is hard. Is there anybody that disagrees with me on that? I think the key is at scale, right? This is hard. So, for example, I was asked by my board to have a look at how can we identify some early warning signals for behavioral risk. I work in a bank, right? The compliance is a really big topic. So they have a nice framework on what they think are behavioral traits that lead to risk, and one of those is groupthink. Now, how do I translate groupthink into data at scale? So these are the challenges we're facing. And this is a cool opportunity, right? But at the same time, we really have to actively focus on where we're heading here. So these are old questions, but we have to have new methodologies. We need new algorithms. We need to adapt existing algorithms from marketing, et cetera, and apply them to our problems in the employee space. And let's face it, academia really needs to catch up. I couldn't find a decent meta-analysis on data mining application in HRM since 2012, and so much has happened in our field since then. So we really need academia to catch up. So we also have real limits in our data sets, yeah? I think you also recognize that. Our HR data is traditionally pretty static, and that doesn't really enable machine learning on behavioral topics. So this is something we really need to actively think about and is a challenge that we need to be honest about. So just recently, I was moderating a big event we had called Man-Machine Money, where we were looking at the kind of social impact of AI. And this wonderful Professor Gina Neff from the Oxford Internet Institute, was kind of challenging us on the social implications of AI. And I think when we're talking about quantifying behavior, this is also something that we need to remember. And I think you recognize some of these challenges to the application of AI. So biased data, biased outputs, this is why it's hard. Bad expectations, I think we've all experienced these. And she calls it calling BS on AI. Now, she's a very elegant English lady, and I'm Australian, so let's call it as it is. Calling bullshit on AI. And in the little photograph there, they did a bit of an interactive session, and they were calling bullshit on AI. So some of the things they came up with was virtual assistants are not assisting, they're selling. Let's be honest, yeah? Arrests are not crimes. So let's be careful with our predictions. So they're the kind of things that they were discussing. And I think this is a valuable exercise for us to do together. Let's talk about people analytics bullshit, because it's really important that we don't get ahead of ourselves because of these reasons. Yeah? So I've come up with a few. Please think of some for yourself, because this is where we get to your ideas. We can predict potential accurately. Bullshit, right? We can reduce, the human behavior is so complex, right? We cannot predict accurately potential. And secondly, I think potential for what? As companies, sometimes we haven't even got that clear. And I think one of the other speakers is going to talk about this a lot. But let's not make lay claims that we can't. And I think some of the vendors will tell you this, right? They can predict potential accurately. So this is where we need to just keep conscious. We can eliminate biases of managers. Bullshit. Because we, just as Al mentioned, our data sets are based on the decisions of managers. We just repeat biases at scale. I think the good news is that we can make the biases more transparent. That's awesome. And we are in the business, especially in analytics in my bank, of making sure that our models are reducing the biases. That's the best we can do. But we cannot eliminate biases in human behavior. That's just, well, if you think you can, please let me know how. We're listening continuously to our employees. Who has a continuous listening program? We're investing in this heavily in Europe. So is the same thing happening in the US? So moving from engagement to continuous listening, using all the comments of employees, et cetera, continuously. That sounds a bit creepy. But I think we're still playing in the space of quarterly surveys at the most, right? It's fun, right? Yeah. We can predict sentiment from employee comments, and my favorite, and it's useful. So even if we can't, and I think even if we can, and I think IBM's made a lot of steps forward in this space, but I think the value that they're getting is mostly from clustering of topics. What do you do with sentiment once you... And we need huge volumes of data to be useful in this respect. So now it's your turn. Who's got one for me? No one?
We can predict who the best leaders will be.
We can predict who the best leaders will be. Yeah, bullshit. Am I offending the Americans with my language? It's like the beep should be coming in. Okay, but you get the point, right? Yeah, so I think it's really important that whilst we're exploring these aspects, that we strike a very careful balance between our ambition and the reality. And that's because we're trying to tell stories with data. And we don't want to end up in this situation, right? I think you've read the Woody Harrelson, they were looking for this. And Peter Capelli wrote an article that there's no such thing as big data in HR. So we also have to be very conscious of the limitations of our data sets. So another challenge that we face is that scale costs money. Yeah. So I used to get a lot of questions about how did you get the investment to get started in people analytics. So this is constantly something we have to face. And I can no longer justify the size of the investment in my capability on the back of one-off analyses at a specific decision point in a specific moment in time. I can just no longer justify that. So we really have to scale. And we have an awesome opportunity, right? When I read this article, I was like, seriously? Is HR the most analytics-driven function? This was in the HBR. Thomas H. Davenport, very reputable. And he's even suggesting that we are investing so heavily in this area that we're moving past finance. So I sent it to my group controller, because that's my favorite thing to do. And they don't have an advanced analytics team, just saying. So I think this is an awesome opportunity, but at the same time, something that we have to deliberately seize. My team knows that I have a small panic, in the second quarter of every year, because we know it's just fact that it takes 6 months to do an analysis, at least, and then at least a year to get stuff into production. So if my pipeline is not full before the summer vacation period, then I am a little bit nervous about adding the right level of value to justify the investment in my capability. So I have a new analytics boss since he's the chief analytics officer for the bank since October last year, and he kind of described in my mid-year review, Brydie, I finally get it. People analytics is like a startup, a greenfield. So the way in which we evaluate it and the way in which we scale it, we should think about it like a startup. You can't expect to have the same sustained value as a very mature function, analytics function such as risk or a scale-up like cybersecurity. So we need to run it like a startup, experiment really quickly, fail, and move on, right? Because what we're trying to find is our product market fit so that we can scale. So I feel like an entrepreneur within my company, or an intrapreneur. Hands up if you guys feel like an entrepreneur and a little bit lonely sometimes in your companies. Yeah. So you get where I'm going with this. So this and the scale of investment we have made me start thinking about startups. Because as entrepreneurs, of course, we want to move from a startup to a scale-up. Of course we do. And to do that, we have to attract the investment. So the key differences between a startup and a scale-up is that startups are still experimenting about their product market fit. And scale-ups already know where their value is. So they know if they put X dollars in, they're going to get Y dollars back. And they're so confident about that they feel that they can get the investment to do that at scale. And I feel like we're still experimenting on where our value is exactly. And the very big difference we have between startups in the real world and internally is that we have the complexities and constraints of a large organization. But on the other hand, we don't have the threat of competition, right? So we are 5 or 6 years down the track, and we've had a lot of investment. I feel like we're ready to scale up. To give you an indication, tech startups usually take about 1 year to meet a scale-up phase. So what is taking so long? Why are we moving so slowly? I think it's something we really need to ask ourselves, because I think we're ready to figure this out. So this is the reality, the 3 things we've just talked about. What we've been doing is not what we'll be doing in the future. Quantifying behavior at scale is hard, and we need to be conscious about that. And scale costs money, and we don't understand our value yet. So this is all very nice, Brydie, but maybe we should talk about how can we tackle some of these realities and face the future and avoid the bullshit, right? Because that's what we want to do. So ING has kind of set the ambition to be a data-driven company, right? I think that's not new. Everybody's making a digital transformation. We believe the future of banking is based on a platform model. And if you look at the most superior platform companies in the world, Amazon, et cetera, they're just superior data consumption, et cetera, et cetera. So to do this, we've set up a central team, and we really want to focus on improving our delivery so we can scale and be way faster to time to market. And we expect all people to be data fluent. So why am I talking about this? Because this is what I think about when we think about value. We need to devise a really specific method for evaluating value. I had to get my CHRO, whose main focus is HR impact, aligned with my chief analytics officer, who just wants analytics at scale. Insights delivered directly to decision makers, which in our case is HR and managers. So this is how we do it. I think there's lots of different methods out there, but this is something that I've been really deliberately thinking about, and I had a little bit of help from the Insight 222 team to do this. But I think this is my advice for you. Really think deliberately about how you're creating value. And it's quite simple. I did a range of stakeholder interviews with HR leaders and business leaders. We identified 3 people priorities, and then we identify use cases against that. And then I put the use cases through these filters. So on the left-hand side, we love these 2x2s, right, in consultancy, but on the left-hand side is impact. And I think when you think about value, in my bank, it's very simple. There's either financial return or risk mitigation. They're the 2 key drivers of value in our organization. So if we cannot see a line of sight between my analysis and those results, then we shouldn't do it, right? Of course, it needs to be aligned strategically. Of course, there needs to be benefits for leadership and employees. Otherwise, it's not going to have impact. But the key is value. Now, I'm not suggesting that we tie ourselves up in knots trying to calculate and quantify exact numbers, but at least we should have a very good idea before we get started on where it's going to create value. On the bottom is my second point. We need to focus on scalable data insights products. On the bottom axis, they're really yes-no questions. So is there data? Yes, no. Is it accessible? Are we allowed to use it? Yes, no, yes, no. So we put scalable as a yes, no. If it's a no, we shouldn't do it. And when I mean scalable, I don't mean a scalable analysis, so I can do a gender pay gap analysis across all the countries. I mean switching it into products that you can scale. So for example, we are working on employee engagement, so we're doing the surveys, but what I want to do next is give a range of products to the organization. So a manager can ask a question, and then there's text analysis. They can have a digital conversation. They can push out an engagement survey. But these are products that we give to the organization, and all the insights go into my analytical engine. We need to chase business value. So we talked before about the fact that what we're doing in the past isn't going to have the same value as the future. So here's a very complicated slide, but in essence, what we're talking about is making sure that we understand where our people processes impact our workforce capabilities and where our workforce capabilities impact performance, key performance drivers. So trying to connect an engaged workforce to the dollars, revenues, etc., is pretty difficult. That's a long value chain, unless you're in a sales environment. So why not try to connect it to key performance drivers? These are ours in our case. These are our strategic priorities, but you will have your own in your company. We need to start unlocking insights in the relationships between these, and that is hard, but it's what we need to do. So just looking at how effective our recruitment process is no longer going to cut it in terms of predictive insights in the future. Invest in the employee experience. I really dislike the word employee experience because I don't think anybody really knows what it means, and it kind of annoys me when we throw out corporate words without a decent definition. But in essence, I think this is where we're heading, and the advantage for us in people analytics is this is going to unlock, if we do this well, it's going to unlock enormous amounts of new insights from these data sets. So we have a lot of research data in the form of surveys, assessments, etc. in HR. We have a lot of demographic data about our employees. What we're missing is behavioral data. So that's the glorious 3 that makes marketing so successful. So how can we unlock insights into how employees make decisions, how they interact, what they find important, and how that links to productivity, performance, well-being? That's what we need to start looking at. And lucky for us, there's these wonderful enterprise employee experience platforms coming onto the market that will help us with this. So all of these things take a really deliberate data strategy. I think what we are also not doing is looking into the future in terms of our data strategies. We kind of have a question, we look around for some data, oh, it's not there, let's create some here. We need to have a more sustained approach to unlocking data sets and being very creative about that. Because putting together productivity data and HR data is complex and takes a deliberate data ingestion strategy. Dealing with these kind of data sets that are going to be generated by these technologies in the future is also complex. Exploiting open data sets that we can buy in the market or take from free from Google Toolbox, etc., that's also something we need to explore. And I think we're a little bit too backward looking in our HR data sets, working on the data quality and that's not what we need for machine learning. We need big volumes, noisy data that's going to tell us new insights. The other stuff is for reporting. So facing the future, these are the things we've talked about. Yeah, I think this is where we really need to shift the needs, our needs to face the future, and we need to start now because it's closer than we think. So devise a method for defining value. Just be really clear on what value means to you and your people analytics function. Focus on scalable products, not analyses. Products. Package them, get them out into the organization. Chase business value, not HR impact, because we're moving beyond that. Invest heavily in your employee experience measures because that's going to help us in the future and it's going to be of strategic importance to your organization. And that future-focused data strategy is what's going to support all of this. The last bit doesn't come up. But thank you very much.